You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it. All right, Daniel, welcome all the way over there from New Zealand. I shouldn't say all the way over there because it's not that far away from Oz, but how's things, mate?
Good, Matt. Cheers. Thanks for having us on the podcast. Good over here. Still pretty cold, just coming out of the tail end of winter, but it's been a good season so far.
Mate, one thing I am very envious over there is the snow and the mountains over there. It looks amazing. I haven't had the opportunity to get over there to ski, but it is something I know I'm keen on eventually. Especially, I think the pricing over there compared to here too is pretty bloody good. It's so expensive here in Oz.
Yeah, man, it's been pretty good. I've had a couple of days up in Mount Ruapehu this season. Not as many as I planned. Unfortunately, the snow in the North Island hasn't been as good as it was last year, and it's just slightly too difficult to travel down to the South Island to get skiing down there. But they look like they've had a pretty damn good season down there, so a little upset I didn't get to experience that this year, but I'll definitely be heading into the Southern Alps next year to do a whole lot more skiing.
Mate, it's one of those things I find there's so many things in the outdoors I love to do, and I know you're similar, and we started chatting not so much about hunting, but we were talking more about triathlon and running, etc., because that is a very big passion of yours, and it sort of complements your hunting. And I really wanted to talk about that tonight because I find the running side of it keeps my fitness levels pretty good for hunting, even though they're not exactly the same because you're hiking with packs and weights, but you've still got that decent base level of fitness, I find.
Oh, 100%. The two cross over a hell of a lot. And earlier on, I used to do a whole lot more CrossFit and found that generally didn't really translate too well into the hunting, so I kind of started those at the same time. But I also found I spent more time in CrossFit trying to learn new skills and movements rather than developing my fitness, and that's kind of when I transitioned in, which was around the same time that I started hunting as well, and the two kind of just grew together, which was pretty awesome.
So, all right, so I wanted to pick your brains about a few different things because I am nowhere near the triathlon stage because for me, love the swimming, and I swim regularly. I have this. So the way I swim is I'm lucky enough to have a pool, and what I do is I run basically a diving weight belt or a spearfishing weight belt without the weights, and then attach a bungee cord to that so it stretches, and then attach that to a rope that's holding in place off my fence. And what I find is it holds me in the position while I swim, and then how fast or slow it takes up the slack because of that bungee. And I'll just get in and I'll swim for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it might be when I get the chance, especially in the warm months. It's been a bit cold at the moment, and I do like getting into ice cold water, but not to spend that much time in it here in winter. Love that part of it. Obviously love running. It's one of the things I do a couple of times a week. The bike is an absolute killer for me. I really struggle. I think I bought a racing bike and it lasted maybe a month because just that position of being hunched over, knees high up in the chest, it's awkward. I'm not that flexible. It just wasn't a good fit. Mountain bike, no worries, but that bike, no good.
Yeah, was that a road bike or was that a triathlon specific bike?
No, it was a road bike.
I should say. Slightly different.
There you go. So what is the difference there?
Cool. So the easiest way to explain the difference between a triathlon specific time trial bike and a road bike would be the headset on them. So the headset on a triathlon bike, you've got what are called aero bars, which kind of stick out the front of the bike, and you kind of end up in more of a tuck, like you're leaning on your forearms on those bars.
Yep.
And then you've got just your hoods, which are a flat bar, compared to a road bike, which has the traditional bar that loops around, comes across the top where the forks are, and then loops back down the other side. And the triathlon bike over a longer, flatter terrain is generally considered faster. But once again, it's a harder position to hold again.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that position sounds not ideal, and that's the one I really struggle with. It was something that's probably not up my alley, and definitely not for the kilometers you need to do to go for a triathlon. Do you have a favourite out of the three?
Out of the three for the events?
Yeah.
Individually, I love them all a lot. They're all really, really cool. I'm a terrible swimmer, always have been, always will be. It's slowly getting better. I started as a runner, kind of a runner. It was my best out of the three disciplines. And then instead of buying a normal road bike and getting into road biking, then transitioning to triathlon like most people do, I decided I really wanted to just get into triathlon, went out and bought a triathlon specific bike and kind of learned backwards that way. So it's probably been the discipline that I've grown the most in because I've spent a lot of time working on it. But there's always a special place in my heart for just going for a run. It's the easiest out of all three. You just chuck some shoes on and head out the door, go for as long or as short as you want, and you kind of feel pretty puffed at the end of it because it's easily the one that has the best cardio impact on you, and anyone can do it.
No, I agree. The running is probably the easiest from out of the three. Swimming is just a different level. I just find because you're using so much more, all the muscles are firing and it really takes it out of you. And then you've got the breathing element, especially as you fatigue and get tighter and your body's screaming for that oxygen. Yeah, trying to keep that tempo and keep feeding yourself that oxygen is so difficult. I liken it to those hard slogs when you're hunting, like going up a hill, carrying a big pack, or that to me is where I can relate it to, because that breathing, that hard work, I don't seem to find that as much as running. I can stay in that higher zones for much longer as opposed to when I'm hiking with a lot of weight or swimming.
Yeah, it's definitely real similar to carrying some animals up a pretty damn steep hill. You're constantly just gasping for breath, working as hard as you can to try and keep that tempo. But it's also, I find, the one that requires the most technique as well, because technique is what equates to speed in swimming. And it's something that I'm having to work on a lot at the moment to really just drop my race times. My very first triathlon that I did a couple of years ago took me 20 minutes to swim 500 meters, which is incredibly slow for anyone who understands swim times. It's like a 3 to 3.5 minute K pace. I can't remember the exact one off the top of my head. I then worked on that for a good 6-7 months and did my first half Ironman, and the swim took just over 50 minutes for that one, which I was reasonably happy with because I went from barely being able to swim 500 meters to completing a 1.8k swim in under an hour, and I was pretty chuffed with that. And then another 4 months after that, I knocked another 7 minutes off by the time I got to the 70.3 in Tahr at the end of last year. So my swimming's been a rough journey, and definitely relates to carrying a lot of heavy animals up some pretty damn big hills as well.
One thing I found interesting with swimming, I was lucky enough when I did my university degree, being a PE teacher, is I had the Australian head coach for swimming for the Paralympian team, and he was our coach teaching us the aquatics unit. So very lucky to have someone with that level of expertise and knowledge. And I didn't realize that the best way to swim was actually not to cup your hands and push yourself through the water. He taught us that have a nice, relaxed, open grip and let the water flow through. And it actually doesn't take any time off. It actually is less fatiguing on your body and your arms, and you'll swim at the same pace. And I started doing that, and from my opinion, he's exactly right. It just felt I could swim a lot further for longer. I didn't fatigue as quick, and it had no impact on the speed that I was swimming at, which really amazed me because I sort of thought about, you're pushing more water, that force when you're pushing through it. It's not the same when you open those fingers up slightly, but it seems to work.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I guess, the web on a frog or any of those sorts of animals that have webbing in their fingers. It creates more surface area. Even though your fingers are spread out, it still opens your palm up a whole lot more and just relaxes you. But it also comes down to that. It's that technique thing that comes with swimming to go faster. The more you dial that technique in, the faster you'll go, and the faster you'll go without really having to exert any more effort. It's such a buzzy way to exercise, I find.
Yeah, so let's talk about some running, because that's definitely my passion.
Sweet.
Look, we had a bit of a chat on and off, because the one thing I have consistently struggled with my runs is going at a lower heart rate level. So I tend to find I'm always on that anaerobic threshold, that I go way too quick, and I think one of the last runs I did was about 8Ks, and off the top of my head, my heart rate was at about 190, which is maybe
That's
it was
high.
180. Anyway, it was high. It was way too high because I just get when I'm running, I feel like if I'm going too slow, I know I can run faster, and it sort of messes with my mind, and I feel like I'm bludging. It's also I'm terrible in the gym for it. Is that trying to wait that depending on the program and what I'm trying to achieve. If I have to wait for 2 minutes between sets, oh my God, I just can't do it. I always find that it hits a minute mark. I'm like, just do it. It's not like, just get back into it. Stop bludging. How do you go about your training? Because running is such a big part of a triathlon. And how do you focus on that heart rate zone a lot?
Some people might say I focus on it too much. I do all of my running training. I don't worry about pace at all when I'm out running. I try and just maintain a steady. If I'm doing a zone 2 cardio run, I'll look down at my watch every 30 seconds to a minute to make sure that I'm sitting between 140 and 150 beats per minute. And while I've got my pace on my watch, I obviously train with a Garmin smartwatch to be able to do that. It means I can see the average pace that I'm training at throughout my session, but I don't have to fixate on the exact pace that I'm running at that time. And the main number that's showing on my screen is my heart rate. And I just focus on that and keep that within that. And if I find that I'm creeping up 152 to 155 out of that zone 2, more onto a threshold pace, I'll just ease off the gas a little bit and bring my heart rate back down and just automatically slow myself. It did take training because like most people who go out running, they find they just want to go and they want to get a good sweat on and feel like they've worked out hard and well. But when you're trying to build an endurance system that's actually quite counterintuitive, you want to keep your heart rate at a lower rate, for a longer period of time, and that will increase your aerobic capacity. Of course, you also need to be doing speed work throughout the week as well. So intervals is a good one for that. One of my favorites at the moment is 5 by 800 meters. And those sessions I do at a set pace because that's where I'm trying to build the speed come race day in a few months' time. So I'm less concerned about my heart rate and effectively, just train to a pace for those ones. And then when I'm doing my threshold or endurance runs, I train to heart rate and aren't too concerned about my pace, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I might just go back a little bit there for listeners in case they don't understand some of what we're talking about. So essentially, the body has 3 energy systems, and the way it works is we have our anaerobic system, which is made up of our ATP-PC system, which is adenosine triphosphate phosphate creatine system, and that generally lasts for about 10 seconds. And then we move into the lactic acid system, and that is also part of anaerobic. Anaerobic literally means without the presence of oxygen, and that's what gives us energy in the system that we move through depending on how long the duration of activity is. Then we get up to our aerobic system or our oxygen system. So when we're talking about these things, our oxygen system off the top of my head is generally under 80%. So generally you want to be aiming for that 60% to 80% of your maximum heart rate. And that will get you training in that aerobic zone. If you start to push that higher, you're starting to get into the anaerobic sort of threshold or the anaerobic system, which isn't helping your aerobic fitness or your continuous endurance is probably the best way to put that. So just in case people are sort of sitting there going, what the hell are they talking about here? And that's an interesting one because I know I'm doing it it's hard because I haven't got as much time now with the kids and with everything that I do. So when I go out, you mentioned it and saying, hey, just get a sweat on and go nuts. That's exactly what I'm after. It has been one I've been trying to dial back, and I'm getting slightly better at it, but I just feel that I'm not burning those calories and trying to I just feel bludging. It's one of the things, again, I've talked about it, that psychology element. I know what I need to do, but I just don't do it. It was also that ties into my hunting. I really struggle for sit and weights. So I can see the element. I know it's sort of maybe a bit of an impatient thing, which is something I'm starting to really try and work on in my own day-to-day life to just sort of relax a little bit and go, hey, all right, it doesn't need to happen straight away. We can just slowly do this or feel like I'm doing it and accomplishing things as opposed to going hard out all the time.
Yeah, it's a real difficult one. I definitely found it when I first transitioned into the style of training from the CrossFit stuff that I was doing, because all I wanted to do was go out and run 10K as fast as possible, because apparently that would make me a faster runner in time. That didn't work straight away, and I was getting pretty frustrated. So I started listening to various people on YouTube, Instagram. Fergus Crawley was a big one. He's a hybrid athlete out of the UK who races Ironman and does powerlifting. So he did a 1,200-pound squat, bench, and deadlift, and for all those over this side of the world, it's a 230 240 kilo deadlift, roughly around the 200 kilo back squat, and about 140 kilo bench press. So really, really big numbers. And then on the same day, he backed it up with a sub 12 hour full distance Ironman. So that's a 3.8K swim into the 180K bike, followed by a full distance marathon, which is 42K. And to apply more context to that, the average person, when they do their first Ironman, is looking at a time between 14 and 16 hours. So performing at a pretty high level in that space. And he was one of the first people to try and combine those two events into the same day and blew it out of the water. So he, along with a few other people, Nick Beer was another one, talk a lot about that zone 2 training and just trusting the process. And I found over that year and a half that I started training like that, my times did come down, and my ability to run for longer and harder definitely improved with it as well.
One of the things you said there that I really agree with is the Garmin smartwatches. Man,
Yeah,
I'd be lost without that thing. It is so good. And I tend to try and run at about the 6 minute a kilometre sort of mark for the entire duration. And I find it's sort of, I have those both. I look at both. I look at how my heart rate's going and what zone I'm in, because my one shows me the zone and has the little indicator going around the circular face. And I sort of try and focus on that. But then I'm also mindful of the speed that I'm doing. And it does depend, because what I've been trying to do is I try and get a minimum to a week, and I try and do like a shorter, faster, and then a longer, slower. Sometimes it sort of becomes the exact same pace. But I mean, I'm still trying to get my head around that one. But the Garmin's are just fantastic. And then they tie into hunting as well. I find that it has the ability to navigate because you've got that GPS. You can track and then track back through them as well. So it's just like a little bit of a safety clause as well when you're going out, if you want to use it there as like on top of what you're already using. I wouldn't use it as my primary GPS, but definitely as a bit of a backup or something like that, it's not bad to have as well.
Oh, they're fantastic. Just having ticking along in the background as your way marker every 500, 800 meters, because if you have an accident while you're out in the hills and fall down a cliff or something and people are looking for you, still will provide a tracking beacon, whereas your Garmin InReach or your cell phone or whatever might have been thrown off you in your bag and you won't have access to that, but you'll still have your smartwatch on you. And if your bag is just out of reach or just within range of the Bluetooth functions on your watch, it can still connect to one of those GPS devices. I use the Garmin InReach and have that connected to both my cell phone and my watch. You can then activate the SOS function from your watch if those things have somehow come off your person after you've had an accident. So definitely just another tool in the belt, and link perfectly into hunting as well. And they also give you that first light, last light time as well, along with the twilight zones on those. It also appears on my watch as well. So you can really tie it into when's going to be the best hunting time, and you can do that planning for the next day ahead of schedule or before schedule as well.
I've used that a lot. It's where I sort of go to, because that's happened a couple of times to me, and I'm sure other people out here hunting public land over here, especially in New South Wales. You're allowed to hunt 30 minutes after sunset and 30 minutes before sunrise. So those times, if you're going somewhere where you haven't got phone reception or you haven't noted down what are the different times for sunset and sunrise, then you are sort of up a little in a little bit of a bad position, because they do change day to day. And then you are unable to get them, whether it be through, I use Weather Zone normally, and they give them, but if I'm out of reach, they're not there. Whereas you're right, the watch has it. You can just flip through it and go, yep, I know what it is. And the other thing, it's got that indicator. I talked about that circular face on the Garmin. As it moves around during the time, it shows you how long you've got left and where it's going to kick over, and if you're in that twilight period, etc. It's great. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Like, I use it every single time I go out on a hunting trip as well, and it just keeps me on track with the time that we're at. And if I feel like I'm running out of time, I can be like, cool, what time do I have to get up in the morning to be ready to hunt? And it's nailed it every single time.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's just another little tool that can help out, and I'm probably due for an upgrade. The watch, oh geez, I've had mine for probably a good 8 years now. And
that's a decent run.
It has gone very well. I'm just now finding the battery starting to go, and the batteries are unreal on them. Like, generally I was charging it up and it would be nearly 2 weeks before I'd need to charge again.
Yeah, it's unreal.
And that's even with the GPS. The GPS does suck the battery life out of it, but going for a couple of runs a week, and I even use it for my gym sessions too, because it's got your strength training. So you can scroll through all the different things you're using. The other thing, whether you want to use it for hiking, hunting, trail, like whatever you want to do, you can then tack that on, especially when you're training. So if you're wanting to work on your fitness carrying a pack, you can punch in hiking and it measures your hiking, and you can track that all through the Connect app, and it just gives you those insights into your training and what's going on. And if you're getting better, they're so good. Definitely due for an upgrade though.
Yeah, the new ones are absolutely incredible. You can get ones which have a solar screen on them as well, which helps to extend the battery life. But even those ones, if you're getting the full-size model or the extra-large model, will come with a 21 to 28-day battery, depending on which model you're getting these days.
That's nuts, isn't it?
So they just go and go and go. You can also, if you're really into plotting grids and just want to make sure that you're getting the exact pin drops, you can click in and it'll give you your exact location down to a 10-figure grid reference, depending on which sort of system you're using. And that's like accuracy within a meter. So pretty easy, and compared to just trying to use a 1 in 25,000 map to plot where you are. Just super awesome to have.
Yeah, look, I think for me, I'll never buy another watch that isn't a Garmin, because they just offer so much flexibility in whether it be your training elements or in the field when you're out hunting. So that's a really positive. Now, we've spoken a little bit about your triathlons and things like that. What I really like about what you're doing there is you're trying to really bring hunting and the triathlon scene together. So do you want to tell us about some of the things you're doing there?
Yeah, man. So this is something that I've really kind of started working on in the last 3 or 4 months with mostly my Instagram and just talking to people as well. So both triathlon and hunting are two things that I've been incredibly passionate now for multiple years. And I find that, you know, they do both complement each other. The hunting gives me fitness, good, clean, lean meat that I can collect over here in New Zealand because we've got pretty damn good hunting laws. So it means I'm eating really, really good food. But I also don't have the time to be out hunting every single weekend. I don't think there's many people who have that time. I do know some over here whose whole life revolves around it. But there's no way you can get through all of the meat and everything that you get from all of your kills. So I found I needed something that would keep me ticking over in the fitness space so that when I did want to go out hunting, I wasn't going to be blowing absolute date walking up a hill carrying an animal, or even just walking into these areas to go and hunt them, right? And then, as we all know, the hunting community is a relatively small community and a very rapidly shrinking community in both New Zealand, Australia, and around the world. So we need to find ways for the hunting community to branch out into the general public and other places where people can see the value that we provide. So here in New Zealand, we have very little pests. Well, we have no predators that eat any of the animals here. So we would rely 100% on human control for the deer and introduced species to effectively manage their populations so they don't eat all of the flora that's in our country. And by bringing it to triathlon, I think I'm looking at a community that really cares about both themselves being in a fit and healthy state, which includes eating really good, clean protein sources, because protein is one of the most important things that you can eat as an athlete. But they're generally people who really care about the environment as well. And I just see hunting as an extension of caring about the environments that we live in. So really working on ways to link these two communities together. And at the moment, I think the easiest ways to do that is, or one of the best ways to do that, I should say, is just through pushing the content that I've started working on to try and be like, hey, here's how I train for a triathlon, and this is how it relates to my hunting life, and here's how hunting makes me a better triathlete. And in the future, I'd like to do talks and engagements at different races and whatnot about my hunting background and bring it into the triathlon space. But yeah, it's something I've only really started working on in the last few months.
I love the idea because I was privileged enough last night actually to speak at the ADA, Australian Deer Association Sydney branch, just about the podcast and things like that. And in the question and answer sort of space at the end of the presentation, there was a few people asking about those things. What do we need to do? How do we keep going? How do we engage kids and the younger generations coming through in what we do? And it's one that's always been on my mind is I'd love to know the data of how many people get into hunting and then how many people get out of hunting.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to look at information as a collective group to try and understand what is happening, how we can get people to stay into it and have that attachment on the back of health, fitness, because that is a powerful thing. Nobody really, I see it all the time with young people and even my mates, unless they have that real something that they love, exercise just goes by the wayside. And there's a really scary statistic out there. I can't remember where I got it, but it's only just recently come out where I think they said 90% of people over the age of 30 will never sprint again in their life. And I sit there and go,
I've definitely seen that one floating around.
Yeah, that scares the crap out of me because I sit there and go, holy crap, man, I'm 40, 41 this year, next month actually, and I still sprint. And I can't imagine not sprinting and not running and not being physically active. Yes, I get that I'm a PE teacher and that's obviously a passion and a driving force of mine, but I can't understand why 30-year-olds, man, I'd love to be 10 years younger, have a few less injuries and feel a hell of a lot better. That's just really interesting to me. And it's something that I think we need to try and have people understand a bit more and then be able to link that health and fitness across with what we're doing. And I love the fact that there are people out there like the Joe Rogans and that are, really shine this brilliant light onto hunting. And then you've got other people out there what's his mate's name? Cameron
Hanes, the bow hunter.
Cameron Hanes, that's it.
Yep.
Who is, it's all about his running and archery and really healthy incredible. Dude. He's nuts.
55 and he's got a sub 3 hour marathon. Dude's absolutely insane. Incredible.
Exactly. I watch him and look up to him and just go, man, sometimes I feel the body's aching at 41 and go, I've got zero excuse when you got those two blokes, I think Rogan's pushing 50, Cam's 55 and what he's physically doing. And then there's that argument about that healthy, active lifestyle and then being able to do what you want for a hell of a lot longer because in one sense, age is a number. But you've also got to do things to earn that number, if that makes sense.
Yeah, big time. Oh, it makes perfect sense. Like, you don't need to be out there doing sprints every single day if you're wanting to build or maintain your fitness. And it's something you really do need to start working on from the age of about, I'd say, 25. Otherwise, you'll get to 30 and you've had 5 years of inactivity and it's a whole lot harder to get started. But even if you don't have the time to do something every single day, if people are getting out 2 or 3 times a week, 2 runs a week in a gym session at a minimum is better than doing absolutely nothing. And that'll keep them ticking on for a whole lot longer. And at least it means they're doing something and they might find a passion and fitness in some way by just trying a whole lot of different sports that don't require too much effort or investment to get into. And then they could find that they actually really, really enjoy it and start a whole new journey for themselves as well. But it's all about just taking those first steps and being like, cool, I'm just going to go for a jog and I'll be out for 20 minutes today. I'll jog 1 lamppost, walk 2 lampposts, and just slowly build up from there until they're somewhere where they can just do it consistently and feel like they've made some improvement without people judging them. And that's also a hard part. A lot of people feel like everyone's out there judging them when they're out there running and just working on their fitness if it's something they haven't worked on in a long time. And realistically, anyone who is in the fitness community just are stoked to see absolutely everyone out there training and trying to become a better themselves. So while they might look at you and see you out running, they're not looking at you like, what a loser out there running. They're like, that's awesome. That person's trying to make themselves a better version and really develop themselves. And we're just really excited to see it because we just want to fit a healthier world.
Yeah, I am so with that. One of the things I absolutely hate is when people fat shame someone at the gym. And it's just like, this makes absolutely no sense because, yeah, okay, they might be overweight, but they're doing something about it and they're taking those positive steps and trying to rectify whatever has happened in their life to get them into that position. And it frustrates me no end. And I see that and get so annoyed with it because that person is trying to make themselves better, as you just said. And the thing I love about the health and fitness side of it and how it ties into hunting is that you're going against yourself. You're not going against other people. And that's where hunting, it sort of resonates that connection with me going out running and just being fit so that when I get out in the bush, I might be able to cover that little bit extra or wake up the next morning and feel a little bit better or whatever it might be. And then the hunting side of it is I'm not trying to outdo anyone. I'm not trying to beat anyone because I'm not in competition with anybody else in hunting. I'm in competition with myself and that animal. And it's an individual animal that I'm pursuing. It's, I get the trophy side of it 100%, but because they're in such different scenarios, in different environments, in different properties or public land, I don't see the comparison between animals and people and things like that. I never have. Maybe there's something that I'm missing there, and I'd love to hear from someone that has a different opinion. But for me, it's you're going against the animal and pursuing you. You're trying to outdo you all the time. And that's what I probably love about running is that I look at my times and when I get faster and I break those PBs, and that's what I love about the Garmin. I'm not going to lie, when it pops up and says you've broken this PB and it tracks it, that's just a bloody good feeling. And I knocked over 2 the other week, so I was so happy on that.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think the running, whether it be isolation, triathlons, hunting, they are so well connected and they complement each other so that you have a better experience and you're going to be that much healthier and fitter.
Yeah, like they all just kind of relate like completely well. Like I can't be dry firing my rifle every single night. I can shoot my bow most days because I've got the backyard for it, which is pretty lucky. I'm trying to dabble into that as well. But you're right, it's you against you, and while you always look at what the pros are doing and talk about how people run a sub 3 hour marathon and do all of these sorts of things, it doesn't really matter what they're doing as long as I'm improving on all of my own personal times. So like I said before, I'll look back to the first triathlon swim that I did that took over 20 minutes to swim 500 meters, and then I improved on my next one where I did the 1.8K in 52 minutes, which is about nearly 8 minutes faster, and just being able to swim that whole distance nonstop. And then the next thing I was looking at was, okay, cool, now I need to knock time off the entire triathlon race. So I went from a 6:45 half Ironman, so that's a 1.8K swim, 90K bike, and then a 21K run. So I knocked 15 minutes off that from 6 hours 40-ish down to 6 hours 30-ish. I can't remember the exact times off the top of my head, which annoys me. But it's just me versus me, and now I've got goals to go even faster. Probably next year, my next race I'm looking at doing is a shorter distance one, so a quarter distance, so 1K swim, 40K bike, and a 10K run. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to work on my speed throughout the race. So I figured it'll be easier to do that in a shorter distance race before I transition back to those half distances, and then hopefully a full distance one towards the tail end of next year over in Australia. So tying a holiday at the same time, which would be pretty sweet. But it's just me versus me, and just like when I'm out on the hill chasing a Tahr or chasing deer, it's like, it's all well and good talking about all the other trophies that everyone got, but I'm out there to put meat in the freezer for my family, and if I get a nice head, that's a bonus. But I'm not out there chasing trophies. I'm out there chasing an animal in its environment that it knows 100 times better than me. So I have to become a better hunter every time I go out to always keep something in the freezer effectively.
And that's what I love. I love getting out there and learning something new and finding new spots and trying to outsmart these amazing creatures that we put ourselves up against. And that's essentially what we're doing each time. And I want to get into the hunting side, but I also want to sort of say to people out there is the principle of training that's progressive overload is something to work on. If you're not that fit and you're just wanting to improve your fitness for hunting or whatever it might be, and I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here because I know I go way too hard all the time, but the reality is if you can run for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it might be, there's nothing wrong with that. That's your base. And then from that, you want to be upping 10% and do a few of those runs for a couple of times, then up it by whether it be 10% or a little bit longer, time-wise, intensity, whatever you want to do from that. But imagine if you're thinking about it like a set of stairs, and that's what you're doing. So do it for a week or two, then go up again and consistently do that. And it will just make it that much easier for you. So you're not smashing yourself. Because one of the things I always find with mates that I train with or get into, and again, here's this hypocrite because I go way too hard too often, is they get sore or they get tired and then they don't want to do it again. There's some people that like to embrace the suck. I don't mind going out and going way too hard and being super sore for the next 2 days. That doesn't bother me. But I do know a lot of people that do that and they just go, nah, this isn't for me. I hate this. I hate this feeling. So it's got to be, you got to find the right level for you and go down that pathway for that. But mate, let's get into the hunting part because I am jealous of the public land you guys have over there. Like we've got some great public land and I'm not saying that we don't because I really love our state forest system here in New South Wales. Haven't had the pleasure to get down to Vic and, go into the high country down there yet. But I look at you guys over there and, geez, there's so much more access and it's so much more ingrained in your culture. Anyway, that's my perspective from an outsider's point of view.
No, I'm very biased. I think New Zealand has the best hunting in the world. We've easily got some of the laxest hunting laws, bar none. Like, as long as I've got a permit for the Department of Conservation area, so we call it DOC for short, as long as I've got a permit, which is free for that area and lasts, I think it's 30 days off the top of my head, you can go and hunt that in that area as much as you want during that period with no tags and shoot as many animals as you want. Obviously, if you go on and blow out an entire herd out of one area, that is going to be a pretty light area if you try and go back to it in the future. But we just have unreal amounts of access. There's dockland throughout both the North South Island as well as Stewart Island, which is like 80% dockland. And it's just really easy to get out, explore new parts of the country whenever you want, tee up with people from different hunting communities and go out and explore new parts of the country as well. It's something I feel we take for granted. And, I know plenty of people who complain like, oh, it's raining this weekend, I can't get out for a hunt. It's like, that's cool, but we don't live in America where you only got certain hunting seasons, which are only 3 months of the year where you can hunt. We have the ability to hunt any time of year, any place, as long as it's dockland. And then if you're lucky, you've got access to private land as well. But you don't need it to get into hunting here in New Zealand. It's really accessible and it's something we definitely undervalue, I find.
I was having this conversation with a gentleman last night about how lucky we are to have public land. And I put my hand up. If we didn't have public land, I wouldn't have anywhere to hunt, and I would be out of hunting because I just wouldn't have the opportunity. So for me, I think that's such a lucky thing. We're not all like that over here. Our states are not all like that. So it can be a little bit tricky in different parts of the country. But looking at over there, that is bloody awesome. And then you've got such a range of species as well. And look, I will say we are very lucky here with the amount of different species of deer that we do have to hunt. Some are harder to find than others, especially in my state. But that's just part of it. For you guys, you've got a more breadth of animals to chase, I suppose, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, so we've nearly got every species of deer that you can think of, or at least all of the main ones. You've got Rusa, Sika, red deer. We've got, I'm forgetting some. We've also got white-tailed deer down in Stewart Island. But then you branch out and we've got goats that you can go and bowl over. Believe it or not, we've actually got wallabies here in New Zealand as well. They're pests in both the North and South Island. Their population's exploding in the South Island, and they need a whole lot of pest control on those. We got all of the small games. We got birds that you can hunt as well. So we got Canadian geese. We've got peacocks that you can hunt in certain parts of the country. But then you get into the mountain range of the South Island, where you've got my two favourite species. One I haven't actually got a kill on yet is the chamois. They are just a spectacular mountain goat. And then the absolute pinnacle and my favourite animal to hunt is the Himalayan Tahr, which just dominate the Southern Alps, which are, there's nothing else like hunting them. And besides the Swiss Alps where you have to book a hunt, there's nowhere else where you can just go and bowl them over as easily and frequently as you can here. And we're actually working really hard because Doc is wanting to run a cull operation on them here, and I've been working on that for a couple of years to try and do that, just because the populations are out of control because we don't have enough hunters coming over to hunt them, which is just devastating.
That is such an interesting dynamic, and we deal with the aerial culling here at the moment, and it's, in my opinion, in public space, it's a travesty. But interestingly, you're saying that you don't have enough hunters to get out there to, keep the species numbers within check. And I haven't really thought of that as being one of the issues that we may have here. And I don't know if that is one of the things that's a problem here, because I know the aerial culling, they generally pitch it here that it's in areas that hunters can't get to, which I'm not 100% certain that's the case, depending on the situation. I agree there probably is parts that are just too thick. But that I also would be saying, if it's too thick for a hunter, is it too thick to be shooting from a helicopter as well, because do you have an accurate understanding of the target, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very unique dynamic that if you cast back talking to people that have been hunting a lot longer than I have, there was a short supply of these game animals that we were chasing. And now we seem to have the opposite, to the point where aerial culling, they're talking about, using poisons and developing things here to really restrict numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And you guys are facing something similar, because we do hear the issue with possums. I wasn't 100% up on wallabies, so that's a very interesting dynamic. Yeah. And I'm curious about how they've exploded as a population, because it sort of contradicts what we're seeing here a lot, is that there's a lot talking about kangaroos are suffering because of deer eating their food and being competition in the bush. And then yet we've taken a wallaby, taken it somewhere it shouldn't be, and they're flourishing. So it's sort of, it's an interesting relationship. And I think there needs to be far more data and study on this relationship between deer and others, because over here they do want to class them as feral and get rid of them, which is, I think crazy in my mind anyway.
Yeah, that's sad. I honestly don't know too much in depth about the wallaby situation and where they came from and how they escaped. They came from a small town in Waimate. As long as I've been a little kid in the South Island, driving between Dunedin and Christchurch, there's this big yellow barn on the side of State Highway 1, which is more of just a backcountry road now that I think about it. But it just has a sign, hop on into Waimate, and it's always been known for the wallabies. And it wasn't until I really got into the hunting fraternity, where I found out that they're actually pests and they're very quickly growing their population throughout the South Island because they are small. They hide in the grass relatively easy because they're not full-size kangaroos, and they just breed really quickly as well. So yeah, it's not something I'm hugely versed on, and it's something I definitely need to read up on more. But yeah, like all animals and all hunting in New Zealand is just easily taken for granted. And yeah,
I think it makes sense with the wallaby from the point of view is I look at it and go, when we created farmlands and that agribusiness, the population of kangaroos exploded because they just then got that much more good feed. And I'm guessing that would be the same case over there in New Zealand. And it makes sense that that population would grow and grow in relatively quickly because that's what we see here. Even though, yes, they might be a native animal, we see the explosion of the population, especially when there's a good feed around and a lot of water, which becomes one of the big problems when we go into drought and we have those cycles. So I can see it definitely happening over there. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting one. So with the Tahr and those numbers growing, is there a reason that they're growing? Is it just the simple fact that there's just not enough hunters? And is that not enough hunters in New Zealand, or is there been a diminish in international hunters because of things like COVID, potentially the Netflix documentary, The Lie? I don't know if you've caught that one yet, but that's, features you guys over there.
Haven't watched that one yet. Definitely need to. This is all just my personal opinion on this, but I definitely do feel we don't have enough local hunters, like the fly in, fly out hunters from the States, Europe, anywhere else in the world. While they do come and hunt and help reduce the numbers, they're often on guided hunts, which are fantastic, but they're also usually on private land or hard to access land, which is really, really good. But they'll only come in and take one or two animals and then leave. And what we really need is a larger base of hunters coming out of New Zealand and Australia, because realistically, it's not that expensive to fly from any of the major East Coast cities in Australia into Christchurch or Queenstown and head out for a hunt and chase tahr. And it's actually really easy to travel between the two countries with rifles. I've had a few friends do it now. But the South Island's an island with only 1 million people living in it. And, less than 1% of those are realistically going to be hunters. And even then, once you dive into that, it'll be a smaller percentage of that who are people who want to go out and hunt tahr, because you're not only out there having to hunt, you're also doing effectively mountaineering at the same time or working in subalpine environments. So it's very harsh conditions to go out and hunt. And it kind of ties back to that part we were saying about it's too deep for hunters to access. And there's definitely parts in behind our Rocky Mount Cook where it is pretty damn hard to get in there and hunt the animals that are in there, just because you'd be scrambling over rocks for 5 days before you even get to the area you want to hunt, unless you got a helicopter ride in. So, yeah, I'd like to see more people out there hunting and trying to chase tahr, but I also acknowledge that it's a pretty damn hard species to hunt just because of where they live.
It ties back into that fitness. And when you're talking about triathletes and people that are engaged in that space who are super fit, I know it was one of the things that I loved about hunting. And what I mean by that is hunting tied so many outdoor recreational pursuits into the one for me. There was the hiking, the climbing, the camping, the whole element for it. So that has always been a major attraction to be involved in hunting, because I've done day hikes and hike throughs and camping, and when you're doing that with a rifle chasing an animal, I find it more enjoyable because there's sometimes a bigger payoff if you're successful. And then I sort of cross-reference that with, athletes, and that payoff is increased because you touched on it before about the quality of the game meat, and that most athletes, especially in that triathlete space or the triathlon scene, that you've got to be very good with your nutrition and what you're putting in and fueling your body because of the demands of the activity that you're pursuing. So it makes sense people like that would be a really, really good fit to try and get into hunting, because that competitive streak and that pushing themselves is probably would mean of chasing Tahr or chasing things that are that much harder, because there's that physical challenge to it as well. Because I know that's what I like to do. I like hunting areas where it's a hard slog and it's hilly, and I feel that rush of pushing the body through and doing hard yards. And I'd rather do that than just walk out in an open flat. And that's probably one of the reasons I'm a terrible hunter when I sit and wait, because I feel lazy. And I know it's sort of silly, but for me, it is a part of that exercise and that, pushing myself consistently, which I enjoy.
Yeah, like there's just something about how keeping fit throughout the week and then getting out on weekends and going for a hunt just makes it so much easier and more enjoyable. And I'm very much like you. I find it hard to sit in glass on a hill for 3-4 hours. I'm like, oh, there's no animals coming out now. I'm frustrated. I'm going to look somewhere else. And I was out on a bow hunt a month or two ago, unsuccessfully. But I was sitting on this one place that I knew that the deer trafficked through, and I'd been there for about 2 hours by this point in time, and it was meant to be peak activity time. And there was just absolutely nothing coming out using the tracks that I thought they would. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go sit at a different spot and see if I can see any animals moving from there. And I got to that spot, pulled out my binos, and was like, okay, cool. And not even 2 minutes, and then I sort of heard of 5 deer run right past where I was sitting, and I was like, oh, God damn it, this sucks. And it was just that impatience of not trusting the process as well, and wanting to move and check something else out. I guess it's contradictory to the patience and practice that I have to put into the triathlon training, but it just shows you that both techniques can work. But if you've always got that urge to keep moving, you know you're going to cover more ground and you're more likely to see something. And I'm the sort of hunter who likes to move, spot some animals, and then figure out how I'm going to get in close to them and then get the kill. And more often than not, that does work. But I very rarely come out with trophies because I'm not looking for a trophy.
Yeah, for me, I am not that good a hunter, so I haven't got any trophies. But I'm not too concerned. That's not something that I focus on. I think that's the bonus, and I have no issue if people chase it for that reason. That good for them. But for me, that's not what's driving me. And I think it is one thing that definitely helps my training, and that resonated with me a little bit, is that when I'm training, I'm thinking about training for hunting, to be fit to climb mountains or whatever it might be. And I tend to even embrace, like for me, when I'm running and training, doing those things, I'm listening to hunting podcasts and just getting into that zone, not my own, let's just make that clear, but I'm listening to other ones to really just, it just pumps me up. And I think it's one of the things I love about being able to jump on here and talk to different people and, people in a different country like yourself, because I normally wouldn't have that opportunity. And hearing about how they do things and what's different, or even just getting inspiration from them. Like every time I talk to someone and hear stories, even about their passion, it's like it rubs off on me, and it just gets me that much more excited to then get back out there, or to even train to get back out there too. So it's like that flow-on effect for me.
Yeah. And it also cycles back to, where your food has come from as well. So when I'm sitting down for an evening meal, having some sausages or mince or steaks of any type, I can go because we generally only have 1 or 2 animals in the freezer at any one time before you run out of space. You know where the animal came from. You created memories with friends or family when you've gone out and killed this animal. You remember the agony that your legs were in when you were carrying it up this really stupid scree slope and it took you 5 hours to pack out. But it creates stories, it creates memories, and it creates a closer sense of bond with your food and your entire lifestyle. And it's just not the same when you go to the supermarket and pick up a slab of meat. You're like, I don't know anything about this, don't know where it came from. And I think we feel as a population are really disconnected from everything, and it removes that purpose and that drive to want to keep fit or want to do things because we're just doing it because we have to, not because they all link and support into each other, I guess.
Yeah, and I find, maybe it's just me, but I've always found that if it's an animal that I've partaken in its death and, butchering it and the whole process, I know how long that's taken, and I know the effort and energy that has been required to do that. I don't want to waste any. Whereas I do not have that same feeling about buying meat from the supermarket or the butcher or wherever you get it from. And if it sits in there past the due date, it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'll just throw it to the dogs or whatever. Yeah. Whereas I find I've never done that with any of the animals that I've killed. I've always used every single bit that I possibly can, or to the point that there's no offcuts or anything like that, because that will all go to my dogs. So when I'm butchering it up, it will go out to the dogs anyway. So every bit that I can use. And I find that's on the back of knowing where it came from, respect for the animal. And I know for some people that's a really crazy idea, especially if they're not a hunter, is that they don't understand that respect for the animal because you've killed it. But that's part of the whole process, is how hard it was to take that life and to then use it all, because it's not something that is, it's not like going to the supermarket and going, oh, there it is, that piece looks cheap enough, or that's what I'm sort of after, I'll grab it, done and dusted within a couple of seconds. It's a very long, drawn out, lengthy process where I don't think people understand how long it takes. And disconnected is the perfect word, and I use that a lot because it's so true. And people don't get that experience and that connection with their food because it's not there when you go to the supermarket. You haven't spent time, and it's the same as gardening. My wife grows our own veggies here, and I see the time and effort that is required for her to get a yield. And it's not the same when you just go to the supermarket and buy your fruit or your veggies and just grab it and throw it in that plastic bag and take it to the checkout, because it's such an instantaneous purchase, where when you have to grow it yourself, that can take months. Preparation of the soil, planting the seed, fostering it, making sure that it's got that continual care in the right spot for sun. There's so many elements to it, protecting it from bugs, weeding it, like mulching. There's so many elements, and it's like that almost long payoff. And I got in trouble the other day because I cooked dinner for my wife, and I bought half a pumpkin. And I know we had pumpkin at home, but it was like spur of the moment. They're all in the freezer from last season. So I knew that I just did not have time to defrost it and cook it. And I was throwing it on the smoker, and I went, oh, I'll just grab a half of a pumpkin. And so I got in a little bit of trouble for buying it because we had them here and I just hadn't been organised enough. But I get it too, because she was going, well, I spend a lot of time and effort doing this for you to buy something that we've got. And ours are probably, I think ours taste better because, they're organic and we've spent the time. I know where they're coming from. I know there's no pesticides on them. I know all these things. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and it's one that I really try and endeavor to get better at explaining that to people that are non-hunters, because without doing it and experiencing it and being part of it, I don't think you can ever truly understand it.
No, you really can't. And anytime I take meat round to a friend's house who is either not a hunter or wasn't involved in a hunt, while we're cooking it over a barbecue or in the kitchen, depending on what we'll do, I'll always try and take the time to tell them the story of where the animal came from as well, just to try and desensitize them to what is the world of hunting. Because for a lot of people, they haven't experienced what a hunter is. They're like, oh, you went out and shot this. That must be so scary. But, you walk them through the entire story of, driving in and spotting the animals from hundreds of meters away. You talk about the life that you watch the animal live while it's eating grass on the side of the hill and surrounded by a bunch of other animals. And they go, oh, then how can you pull the trigger on that animal? And you're like, because I need to feed my family. But also because realistically, that's what I'm out there to do, and I'm a predator, and it's the prey, and it's all the circle of life. But we don't do that, and then here in New Zealand, the populations just get out of control, and we'll have Doc flying around in helicopters shooting everything, and all of that meat going to waste, and those animals dying for nothing. So realistically, I'm thankful because that animal's giving me nourishment for months to come, but it also gives me a sense of fulfillment and pride that I can operate in its environment without it realizing that I'm there, to a point where I'm able to take its life. But I just have just utter respect for the way that these animals live in the conditions. Like, we're out on some pretty damn frosty mornings, and they're just out there with their coats, like just their fur coats and a little bit of fat, and we're out there rugged up to the nines wearing thermals, mid-layers, puffer jackets, everything to try and keep ourselves warm and not freezing to death. So, like, they definitely got a one-up, and I just got, a different level of respect for where my food comes from when you see the environments that they live in, what they have to put up with. Like, anytime there's a storm, we just stay at home, but all they can do is stay in the tree lines and be a little less wet. So it really does connect you more to the earth and our food than anything I can buy from the supermarket.
Oh, most definitely. And I think that comes down to also, like, I have this funny fascination of what's happened with dogs, and how we now have these designer dogs and dogs that sit in handbags, and they're almost like this commodity. And it's so far away from what the dog actually should be. And I mean, dogs came from wolves when you think about it that way and you trace it right back. And it's almost a travesty to see what some dogs have become. And it's fascinating, and it's probably one of the things I really love. And I was listening to a great chat with Joe Rogan and Andrew Huberman, I think it was, and they were talking about dogs and hunting dogs specifically, and the different genetics and how they've been bred, and we've designed dogs for different things. And it fascinates me. They were talking about coon dogs and how the ears are really, really long, and that is for actually, as they run along, it bounces up scent to help the dogs track that coon as it's chasing it. And I just went, that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, it pushes it up to its olfactory senses. And I went, that makes sense, but it's so amazing that there are all these different elements to a dog. And then you've got a Chihuahua or a pug. And you just, it's sort of, I don't know, for me, it doesn't sit right thinking that they're so far detached to where they came from and where they once were. And humans are the same. We are an apex predator that has been, I guess, taken off the environment because of our technology and our houses and our ability to farm and things like that. But for us, we are still a part of that system, or we should be at least. But exactly what you're saying, we need the smarts to survive in that world, the clothing, the ability to, use the technology that we can create to give ourselves an advantage on those animals. Just like an animal uses its senses, we use our intelligence to create things to assist us with hunting. And I think people miss that. I think when people talk about, it's an unfair advantage that you have a rifle. Well, no, that is our advantage. Like a cheetah can run really fast, like a deer has heightened senses as a prey animal to get away. Ours is the intelligence to shape our environment or shape weapons to assist us in being more successful predators. And I'd never really got the understanding when people go, it's an unfair advantage, because that is just our set of skills as opposed to the animal's set of skills to evade us.
Oh, big time. And it's only an unfair advantage until you spook the deer and you watch them run out from 200 to 800 meters within the space of 30 seconds. And you're like, okay, well, this is why we have this unfair advantage, because there's no way we can cover that same distance in that amount of time over the terrain that they're running in. We can't compete with them in their own environment. So, the technology is there for us to use. And with growing populations, it only makes sense to use it more anyway, because that way everyone can get meat for their freezer and honestly, bring their shopping bills down.
Oh, most definitely. And I'm not sure how you guys are going over there, but here inflation's just gone through the roof and
Same
everyone's
here,
doing it
man.
tough from a financial point of view. And it's pretty crazy. So it makes 0 sense seeing aerial culling and crap like that going on when that's just
Mm.
wasted meat. And it's something I've been hopefully at some stage, I'm not sure if you've heard of the guys over there doing Hunters for Hope, where they, use the meat and give it out to those in need. I think it's such
I
a
have heard of that.
fantastic idea. Yeah, I think it's such a fantastic idea, and I really
It's
want to learn
awesome.
more about it and whatnot because we don't really have anything over here, and I do think that's because of the legislation the government's got in place. Like it's crazy in one state here, we can't even share game meat.
Yeah.
That's insane, and I sit there and just go, what is that coming to when people are doing it tough and can't feed their families? Or they're struggling to eat. And we've got legislation that says you can't gift game meat, which is some of the most nutritious, healthy food in the world. It's insane. It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
It's ridiculous. And we've got really similar rules here as well, which is super frustrating, which is why, we go around to friends' houses and cook the food with them because then we're not gifting it to them. It's not to say that a lot of people don't just gift it away anyway because they can go and shoot as many animals as they can. It's not being policed, which isn't great because people are just doing it anyway. But technically, it's not something that we're meant to be able to do. And it makes it really hard for all those families who are on the breadline to get a high quality protein source because there's an abundance out there. We just need to be able to get it to them. And Hunters for Hope or something over here would be the perfect thing for all of those hunters who go out every single weekend and get 2 or 3 animals every single weekend to help the communities in need get the food that they actually need rather than just eating the junk that they get from the supermarket because it's all that they can afford.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, and I don't understand the logic behind it. And similar over here in Victoria is that the legislation is actually there, and I know some people don't believe it. And there's been some interesting information from bodies within the hunting community and shooting community that said that's not there. I've got the links from the discussions in Parliament, and it's there. It just they don't police it, so it's the same thing here. But that doesn't mean that they won't because it is in legislation. That's like saying the speed limit is 60. If you do 70, it's only 10. We might not get you this time. Well, they still can because it's there in law that you are doing the wrong thing. So it is one that concerns me for that. And if anyone wants it, more than happy to share that link and those details. Yeah, man, it's really an interesting time when we see government expenditure on programs like aerial culling that wastes food when people are doing it tough. And that is essentially something that we could fix or rectify. Yes, it would be hard, but going out and being able to harvest animals, use the meat for those that are less fortunate. Hell, there's other opportunities too. Like I sit here and think about schools and think about especially schools in more low SES areas and being able to supply kids with lunches of game meat. And instead of, having to purchase whatever is in the canteen. I do like that system in America where they feed children. I think Switzerland do it too. I think Finland do it too, is that they supply lunches. And I sort of sit there and go, there's an opportunity that if you're talking about all these animals that are, out of control in the numbers, there's something that they could actually be super useful for, save some money for people, create some jobs, stimulate the economy rather than just shooting them and letting them die. There's so many more opportunities in that supply chain other than the person, in the helicopter and pulling the trigger. There's that, and where it ends, there's so much more past that. So it is disappointing, and it's sad to hear that that's something you guys are facing over there as well as what we're seeing over here.
Yeah, man. And we just have to remember that we also brought deer and all of these species to both New Zealand and Australia, less the kangaroos. But we brought them over here as a food source and game in a previous time. And we now need to be able to control that as well. And if that means, instead of putting one helicopter up, we're putting two, one to shoot the animals and the other to rescue the animals, it won't realistically cost that much more to be doing recovery operations. But the benefit it would have for the country is enormous, because you'll get a healthier population from it who are more motivated and want to do more. And it's all just a positive, uplifting cycle where one thing fuels the other and everyone's striving to become better because they're eating better, they're receiving better food, they're feeling valued by their governments. And when people feel more valued by their governments, they want to work hard because they're proud of the country they live in. And it's all just, one thing piles on top of the other, and you just get a highly prosperous nation.
Well, it's like that. It's social capital at the end of the day. What you're talking there is that it's funny. We talk about health, and we look at cigarette smoking here in Australia is the perfect example. Is that they put all legislation in to stop people smoking, and that has curbed the amount of people smoking. And what that has done is obviously then the flow-on effects from the variety of cancers, emphysema, and the like. That has been a really positive thing. People are living longer and healthier, less impact, or disability adjusted life years on the back of smoking. So that's a really positive thing. Exactly what you're saying about nutrition and good food that has a cultural significance, and that gets lost in the argument a lot. I see it here in Australia all the time, is that hunting is in our culture. And now whether that's my culture of an Indigenous Australian who has had people in the landscape for 65,000 years, whatever that might be. It's also the culture of somebody that came over in the first fleet well, maybe not the first fleet because they were convicts, but someone that came over and were able to hunt, and they brought animals over here to hunt. That is still a cultural tradition. And we lose that side of it in the argument. And I've seen it here. I've seen where they're trying to reduce the amount of ducks being able to be shot, but then segregating it and saying, okay, but if you're Aboriginal, you can do it because it's a cultural thing. Well, hold on. How are we valuing on both? I've got Aboriginal on one side and English, Irish on the other. Who are they to say that one has more of a cultural link to hunting than the other, when both sides have done it? That doesn't make sense to me. I really don't understand. I think you cannot argue if you're going to say that anyone has a cultural history of hunting. You've got to say everybody has a cultural history of hunting, because we all did it. All our ancestors did it, or we wouldn't be here. It's literally that simple.
Oh, big time. Like, every single culture in the world was founded on a tribal hunter-gatherer background before we invented farming or anything else. Like, that is what made humans what we are today, because we needed that high-fat, high-protein source to power our rapidly developing brains hundreds of thousands of years ago, whether you believe in evolution or not. We needed that evolution to eat those high-energy fuels as we adapted and became what we are today. And that's carried on through to even now when we're all hunting. But it also tracked through when farming was still coming a thing. We still needed to harvest that meat. And the grain supplementation from farming realistically just kept us going for longer when meat was more scarce. But we always pushed and pushed and pushed to get that meat source, because our bodies knew that's what we actually needed.
Mate, it is. It's a very interesting one, and I think more significance has to be put into place on the cultural capital that is hunting for our ancestors, for where we are as people today, and for it to stay as part of what we do and keep that connection with what we've always done. So it's one of those things I encourage everybody to make those links and talk about those links, is that we're not doing something new. We're doing something that's as old as time. I haven't seen any rock paintings of salads. So until someone shows me those, I'm probably going to stick to that line. But as I say, I always like to learn and hear from people with opposing viewpoints and try and make sense of this crazy world we live in. So, mate, look, I have had a fantastic time having a chat to you. I appreciate you giving up your time and coming on the podcast. And, mate, hopefully I'm pretty confident we'll do it again down the track. And best of luck with all your competitions and everything coming on. If you haven't, I'll have all the links for Daniel if you want to follow his journey I'll put all the links in the show notes as well. But, mate, appreciate you and your time coming on to talk about what we have tonight.
Oh, thanks heaps, Matt. It's been a really enjoyable night and look forward to doing it next time.
Sounds good, mate. Can't wait. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed it. Bye for now. If you have a topic, guest, question, or any gear that you want to hear about on the podcast, shoot us an email, australianhuntingandbeyond@gmail.com. Alternatively, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links are in the show notes. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a review and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.